China says it'll rein in the disorderly expansion of the electric car industry. It's saying that it's going to take some drastic measures to kind of, in a sense, punish some automakers in China they believe are doing things that are hurting China's electric car industry. And of course, scaring America and Europe. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. It's great to see you. China vows to rein in capacity in the electric vehicle industry. I believe that China thinks there's too much price cutting going on, and it believes there's too much production. In other words, there's 80 different electric car companies. They're all producing a lot of EVs, and the market is just not quite big enough to have that many car companies. It doesn't make sense. And China believes that this is a problem. Beijing is warning on Western trade protectionism and local price cutting. China says it will rein in expansion of the country's electric vehicle sector as it responds to Western criticism of its industrial and trade policies that have contributed to a wave of Chinese car exports. Now, it is true that China is exporting more cars than any other country in the world now. It's surpassed Japan. The truth is, though, China is not really exporting anywhere near as many electric cars as what you think. Well over 95% of the EVs manufactured in China are sold in China. Now, I'm excluding Tesla here because we know Tesla has a factory in China and it exports a lot of those EVs. But outside of Tesla, 95, in fact, I believe it's about 96% of all electric cars manufactured in China are sold in China. Yin Gubin, the Vice Minister of Industry and Information Technology, said on Friday there was insufficient external consumer demand and that Beijing would take forceful, this is their quote, forceful measures to address blind construction of new EV projects by local authorities and enterprises. What a lot of states in China are doing. I mean, there's 1.4 billion people living in China. There's a lot of different cities, big cities, even small cities are big cities outside of China. And what a lot of them are doing is they're incentivizing companies to build EV factories in their local cities. There's billions of dollars going into this. So it's not just the Chinese government. It's also a separate thing where individual, smaller local governments are incentivizing it. I think the Chinese government thinks it's going too far. There are also some disorderly competition behaviors, said China. The comments come as the electric vehicle industry, one of China's few economic bright spots in the last 12 months, has kind of been targeted by the West, by the United States and by Europe recently. In September, the EU launched an anti-dumping investigation into the Chinese EV industry, specifically targeting BYD and SAIC, or MG as well, highlighting fears that Chinese companies pose an existential threat to German, French, and Italian car manufacturers that are struggling to compete with low-cost, high-tech imports. Beijing hit back last month with an investigation into French cognac sales to China and into basically sales of European alcohol in China. China is basically just saying to Europe, watch what you do because we can punish you. And they can. China has a lot of power. If you think you're buying an electric car, let's say you live in Europe or you live in the United States, you think you're buying an electric car that doesn't have anything from China in it, think again. If China suddenly said, we're not going to sell any parts for EVs to Europe or to Western automakers, they wouldn't be able to make any EVs. There is not a single car manufacturer on the face of planet Earth that doesn't rely on China to manufacture EVs. At least some of the parts, if not a large percentage of them, are manufactured in China. That's simply the reality here. And you know how we know this is true? Because the CEO of Mercedes-Benz told us. He said that. He said, if Europe does this, they should be very careful because it's going to come back to bite them. The EU investigation followed complaints that vast subsidies and bank lending from Beijing had underpinned the expansion of Chinese manufacturers. But let's be fair here. Now, I'm not a Chinese apologist. I'm just being logical. The truth is, Germany, France, the United States, every country in the world with an automotive industry provides billions of dollars of subsidies to its automotive industry. If it didn't, its automotive industry would not exist. That's simply the history of planet Earth. So it is a little bit misleading what's going on here. I think it's sort of smoke and mirrors, to be honest. European companies fear that China is building EV plants for far beyond the levels needed to meet demand in China, following the pattern seen in steel, aluminium, and solar panel manufacturing. All sectors that China now has squeezed out competition from outside of China. They've basically gotten rid of all the competition and they now dominate in those industries. However, China also slammed foreign protectionist behaviors and the abuse of trade dispute mechanisms, echoing earlier comments from Beijing over the EV probe by Brussels and sweeping US restrictions on China-made EVs and batteries. China last year overtook Japan as the world's biggest car exporter, largely thanks to a boost in sales in vehicles sold in Russia, and to a lesser extent, Chinese EV sales to parts of Asia, and even lesser extent to Europe. So as you can see in that order, vehicle sales in Russia, number one. Number two, Chinese EV sales in Asia. And number three, Chinese vehicle sales, specifically EV sales in Europe, which is still relatively small though. Chinese car exports rose more than 60% to nearly 5 million vehicles, of a total market of around 78 million. Yet, China reiterated Beijing's concerns about intense domestic competition, but did not announce any new measures to rein in price cutting that has beset the industry since late 2022. While foreign car manufacturers have been very slow to transition to electric vehicles, they're the worst hit by intense competition in China, with scores of local companies, Nissan, Mazda in particular, companies like Mitsubishi who have exited the country. Hyundai has been affected enormously. They've just sold a factory they spent $1.4 billion to build. They sold that for $250 million only 4 years after they manufactured it. All these companies have been massively affected in China. They're struggling to compete with Chinese car companies and Tesla. The biggest concern is that the market for EVs has quickly become super saturated and that a vicious price war is just around the corner, said Louis Gave, an expert with Gavico Research. Now that automakers have ready access to generous bank credit, the path of least resistance is to try and gain market share and kill off competition by slashing prices and margins. In particular, recently, BYD has been doing this. They now make profits on their vehicles. Their profits are very healthy across their entire company, and they are reducing prices probably more than anyone else. All of their vehicles have seen price cuts over the past couple of months, every single one of them, and they have a lot of different models. Getting back to this story, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like China is engaging in something here that they shouldn't be doing, something untowards, or are they just doing what every other country would do in their situation? Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching.